Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a crazy Karen repeatedly parked her car on my farm claiming the previous owner gave her permission. She ended up suing me when I had the audacity to get her car towed away. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the story. Me and my parents have been farmers in our town for a really long time. We had been thinking about making a change for a while, looking for a better place to farm with soil that would bring in more money. So we started talking to folks we knew from outside our town. They pointed us to this piece of land, said the owner was selling it for a good price because he wanted to move to the city. The owner, he was the only child of an old couple. He had already moved his folks to the city and was going back and forth, trying to sell the farm as quick as he could. We looked at a few other places during those months, but somehow we always ended up going back to that nice rural farm. So after my dad went back home, I decided to stick around at the rural farm. It needed a lot of changes and fixes, so I called up some folks who could help with that. However, when they finally arrived, we ran into a problem that I hadn't seen coming. So there was this foreign vehicle parked right on my farm, and the owner of that vehicle was going nuts, yelling and pointing fingers at the workers that I had called in. I walked up to her and couldn't help but groan because I knew exactly what kind of person she was about to be. You see, there's something about Karens, no matter where you are, no matter how far you are from those big cities, Karens somehow always manage to find ways to annoy you and act like they are better than everyone else. They are also almost always dressing the same, which is honestly kind of funny. Anyway, this Karen pointed her finger at me and went off about how dare an immigrant like me buy a property on what she claimed was her land. Yeah, she called this whole damn town with its diverse culture her town, like her forefathers had brought the whole place or something. I had no plans in arguing with people like her, so I just told Karen to move her vehicle off my property, but instead of listening, this Karen just laughed and said that the previous owner gave her the green light to park her cars on the farm, so she thought she had every right to do so now as well. We went back and forth for a good while. Karen kept acting all entitled and I kept refusing to give in to her childish behavior. After about 30 minutes she finally moved her car, but I had a hunch that this was not the last of the problems Karen was gonna cause me. The very next day I decided to cover my bases and put up no trespassing signs all over my property. However, it seemed like Karen could not care less about my signs. Sure enough, in the evening there was her car parked right on my farm again. I headed over and this time I noticed someone else getting out of the car. He looked about the same age as Karen, all white with a big beard and dressed head to toe in denim. It seemed like he was trying to intimidate me, rolling up his sleeves and flexing his muscles. But honestly, I could not help but find it hilarious. Here he was trying to outmuscle a guy who had worked in the fields his whole life while he barely had a tan. Without even giving the other guy a second glance, I told Karen straight up to move her car off my farm or I would have to take some serious action. Now, I don't usually use such polite words with Karens like her, but I was still getting used to this new town and it was only my second day there. But of course, these troublemakers just laughed at my warning. The guy puffed up his chest and got all in my face telling me to keep my immigrant feet off their land or else they would make sure I could never walk again. I couldn't help but notice that he reeked of cheap cigars. I rubbed my nose, turned to Karen and told her straight up that I would be calling the cops. She was trespassing on my property and now she could deal with them if she wanted to. Karen let out an annoyed huff and proudly declared that she had a legal contract with the previous owner and that she was gonna prove to everyone that immigrants like me were nothing but liars here to steal from them. She even threatened to call the police herself tomorrow to get me thrown out of town. But she said today that she was too tired to deal with my so-called discrimination and wanted to get away from my farm. It seemed like Karen's partner was not quite in on her plan as he looked back at her, clearly confused. I couldn't help but chuckle. He shot me a glare before heading back to Karen's car and finally they drove off my property. I knew Karen was probably just stalling, planning to make some fake contract papers to back up her claim or something. Maybe she was too dim to realize that since I had bought the property from the previous owners, I could simply call the previous owners and prove her wrong. Anyway, whatever she was gonna do was gonna be both hectic and downright hilarious for me. The next day, there was no sign of Karen's car on my property, and it seemed like she had not even thought about calling the police on me. The day after that was the same, and so was the whole next week. During that time, I had called up the old owner to confirm if what Karen was saying was true or not. And while it was true that the owner's father had let Karen park there, none of it was in writing, and there was definitely no contract like Karen was talking about. I'd also asked him if I could call him up in case there was any police investigation, and he agreed. The work on my farm was going great, so when Thanksgiving rolled around, I asked all my coworkers to take the whole week off and spend it with their families. I had planned to have my parents over for the holidays, but the very next day when my farm was empty of workers, it suddenly got filled with cars. I walked out to see Karen and what looked like her entire family there, getting out of their cars and heading towards her house like they owned the place. Karen had this smug look on her face as if she thought I would be intimidated by the number of people that she had on her side. Boy, was she in for a surprise. I grabbed my phone and found the number of the local towing service I had saved for this very moment. I made the call explaining the situation to the towing company. I told them about the unauthorized vehicles on my property and asked if they could send a truck over to remove them. The person on the other end assured me that they would dispatch a tow truck right away. After what seemed like an eternity, I spotted the tow truck turning into the dirt road leading to my farm. I went over to greet the tow truck driver and explained the situation to him. He nodded understandingly and started preparing his equipment to load up the cars. Karen predictably exploded at the sight. She threatened to call the police and sue me for damages, claiming that she had a contract with the previous owner allowing her to park here. She argued with the driver as well, but the driver was not having any of it. With the tow truck driver's no-nonsense approach, Karen's cars were loaded up one by one and hauled away. It was a satisfying sight to see them finally being removed from my property, but true to her word, Karen called the police, but she didn't stop there. She tried to sue me for discrimination and for not honoring some supposed contract she claimed to have with the previous owner about parking arrangements. Once the police arrived and the situation unfolded, it was quickly evident that there was never any valid contract in place as Karen claimed. Her shoddy forged documents couldn't withstand scrutiny, and the testimony of the previous owners themselves contradicted her story. The tables turned swiftly, and it was Karen who found herself in trouble. She was charged with forging documents and attempting to deceive the authorities. However, I was not done yet. I decided to take legal action against Karen and sued her for trespassing and causing emotional distress, and the court granted me a restraining order against her to prevent any future incidents. The police then arrested Karen, and although I knew her family members were able to bail her out later on, the entire ordeal was punishment enough to make her think twice about ever trying to park on my property again. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Neighbor accepted my Amazon package and threatened to sue me for stealing my own package. Last year, I had a bunch of drama with one of my neighbors over an Amazon package I was supposed to get delivered. This guy, my neighbor, lived to watch everyone and complain about every little thing. But once I started paying attention to him, I realized he was up to something too. Before the drama, he was constantly bothering my family about something. If it wasn't my kids coming home late and their headlights waking him up or my Yorkie barking at him while he mowed his grass, it was probably something else ridiculous. One time he even complained about my holiday decorations being too festive. To be honest, no one asked him, but he always wanted to say something. Anyways, by far the most ludicrous display of dickish neighbor behavior was the time that he actually threatened to sue me for stealing my own package off of his porch. Sure, I should have known that he was going to say something, right? With his annoying ass always complaining about something, but it was my package and not his, and damn it, I was not going to let him have it. Also, I had spent over $200 on it, and it was a present to myself. It was a really cool standing desk that I still use and adore very much. It has saved my neck and posture from my work from home desk job. I had been home all day and was keeping a close eye on the tracking of my package. I was really excited about it and wanted to open it right away. When my Amazon app said that it was delivered, I went outside to see that there was no package on my porch, but looked over and noticed a big box on my neighbor's porch. Why UPS? I run over, check the address, yes it is mine, and carry it back to my house. I set up my amazing new desk and enjoyed it for almost 2 weeks. I honestly thought that I had gotten away with stepping foot on his precious property without hearing about it, but I should have known better. I ended up getting a visit from the damn police almost 2 weeks later, saying that my neighbor had filed a report stating that I had stolen a package from his porch and he has video evidence. For some reason, he could not even talk to me first. He had to call the cops instead. I'll admit that I was a little worried just having the cops on my porch and all, even though I knew I did not do anything wrong. I showed them my Amazon app and the tracking/delivery date and also brought out the invoice for the desk. I no longer had the box, so that was the best I could do to prove my innocence. Thankfully, the cops did not have too much to argue and quickly dismissed the issue, realizing that my neighbor is an idiot. That stupid douchebag, how dare he? I am onto him now. I ordered some cameras to be installed on my property to keep an eye on things and try and bug the hell out of him with silly stuff that does not matter, like stepping on grass or taking his own packages. Yeah, my reasons might be petty, but I don't care. A few weeks later, I received an email from him, honestly don't know how he got it, kind of weird y'all, stating that he was going to sue me for stealing and trespassing, amounting to almost $3,000. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt at this. Sue me for what? Stealing my own package? It also did not cost $3,000. I honestly hope that he tries to sue me so I can sue him for wasting my time. I chose to ignore him and not respond to his stupid email. I know he cannot sue me, and if he tried it would be for nothing. A judge might even make fun of him. So I go back to my life and proceed with things as usual, but noticed one day that there seemed to be more traffic going to his house. It was not much more, but an extra car or two was noticeable. I began paying more attention to my cameras and finally caught a trend. I realize now that this had probably been going on the entire time, I just did not see it until I had the cameras installed. They were the same 5 to 10 people that would come and visit him throughout the week, almost religiously, like on a schedule. He is not necessarily that old, so I'm not sure why he would need that many people to come over and take care of him or whatever. It just did not seem likely. One day, the camera in my backyard caught a small party he was having. He had a few people over at once and they were outside on his back deck with a fire and beers. This was a pretty rare occurrence for him, and then they busted out a tray of some white powder. We all know what this is. And obviously ripe stars, they were trying to bake a cake. Anyway, who knew that my annoying snitch of a neighbor did drugs? So I paid more attention over the next few weeks and recorded the dates and times that these individuals kept returning and how long they stayed, making it pretty obvious what's really going on. He's not only doing the coke, but he is selling it too. I pondered for several weeks about whether or not I should actually say anything to authorities, so I play a little game of chance. If he complains to me about anything before the end of the month, I would call the cops on him. If he kept quiet, I would keep the info in my back pocket for blackmail purposes. I know, my morals can be questioned too if you want. Maybe I went out of my way to antagonize the guy just a teeny bit. I cleaned out my car and let the trash from my floorboard blow onto his yard. I trimmed my tree and left the branches in his backyard. I invited friends over and had them park in front of his house on the street, he really loved that, and I let my dog take a crap on his grass. I know, I'm shameless and I don't care. It did not take long before he sent me some passive-aggressive email about all of my wrongdoings. I only responded with, "Lol, sorry not sorry about what happens next." I then proceeded to call the police and set the ball in motion for him getting his ass in trouble. It was not even a full day later and the cops were at his door, I'm assuming asking him where his drugs were. Who the hell knows, but he was clearly in deep trouble. I did not see him for over a month, and I found out from a friend of a friend that worked at the police department that he was released on probation but was still in big trouble. He also had to do so many hours of rehabilitation classes. I felt kind of bad, but my kids told me that he brought it on himself. I ended up trying to talk to him several months later, but he very quickly told me how he felt and went inside. I know that he knows exactly what landed him in that situation though, and as mad at me as he wanted to be, there is no way that he did not think to himself, well, maybe if I had not been such a giant piece of crap to my neighbor, then she would not have called the cops. For almost a year, anytime he would go outside, he would have his black ankle bracelet on, showing that he had yet to gain back his freedom. Just this past month, I had managed to get him to finally say something nice, and it even sounded like an apology. I think that he has had a lot of time to think about how he was a crappy neighbor, and hopefully we can continue to build a better relationship from this point on. And honestly, I don't care what he does behind closed doors as long as he leaves me and my Amazon packages alone. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, have you ever had any neighbors that stole your packages? Please let us know in the comments if that ever happened to you. And while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could also like the video, because that would help my channel tremendously. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled "Woman Parked in My Spot." So the complex I live in has assigned parking in both shaded and not shaded spots. My spot is between two other assigned spots and is shaded. The spot to my left is also shaded and the spot to my right is not. The car that parks in the unshaded spot is a bigger SUV type of car and it is white. I never really paid attention to the exact make or model though. Yesterday I get home and there is a white SUV type car in my spot. The unshaded spot next to me is open. I figure it must just be the neighbors and decide I will just pull into the unshaded spot next to my usual spot. I was only going to be home for a short amount of time before leaving to pick up my boyfriend, so I figured I will just park in their spot for the time being, and if they are still there when I come back, then I will ask them to move. Once I pull in, I realize there are people in the car just sitting there, and also wonder if it is in fact the same car that is usually next to me, but I was not too sure. I still really did not want to bother these people and I just wanted to get inside, so I gathered my things, and as I am getting out of my car, a woman from the driver's side comes around and asks if I am Carla. I don't know who that is, so I just say no awkwardly, and she sort of laughed and was like, "Seriously?" I guess she thought I was being sarcastic or something when I said I was not Carla. Then she went on to say, "Well, that is my spot, I'm just waiting for my realtor." So I simply pointed in the direction of her car and said, "And that is mine." And then she just said, "Oh, haha, let's switch then. It was just so hot not being in the shade." So I get back in my car and switch. I went up to my place afterwards and was thinking about it a little more, and it was just kind of weird. Like, I at least recognized the color and size of the vehicle next to me, but my car was not familiar to her at all. Also, how are you gonna park in a spot that is not yours and then immediately tell someone they are in your spot without knowing who they are? When I left to get my boyfriend, the car was gone, but it was there again when we got back home. They were in the unshaded spot, not my spot. I told him about it when we got inside and he was pretty annoyed and is convinced she does not actually have a spot yet, as apparently her car is not the same as the car that's been parking there. Which does make sense in some ways, but also leads me to more questions. Like, why say the unshaded spot is yours when you don't even have a spot yet? The whole situation was rather strange. And the next one is titled, "Let me use your car for as long as I want." This was a few years ago, so I was asked by EB, ex-wife, if she could borrow a car as her car needed to go into the shop. So before I agreed, I asked a few questions. How long did she need it? She could get a loaner if it is more than a day. Did she have money to pay for it? Yes. With a sense of dread but feeling like I did not have a choice as she needs to transport our kids half the time, I did not really like it, but agreed to let her use one of my cars for a day. The EB's car was the last good car I bought. She got it when we separated, had been driving it into the ground for years. Constantly runs out of gas, does not check the oil regularly, ran with bad brakes until they failed. You know, your mechanic's dream customer. Now, I've been driving beaters for years, cheap, barely running things I have suffered with, partly for the joy of fixing what I can myself, partly as car repairs are so random that if something major breaks I can just dump the lemon and move on to the next car, partly because I am cheap. I have 2 cars, the Sundance, auto start heater works great, transmission going out, and the Crown Vic needs oil with every fill up but has ice cold AC. I drive both, so as to not beat up one car too much, also have 2 cars as a backup. Problem with one, drive the other, system works out pretty well. So I decided to let her use the Crown Vic as it was only going to be a day. Ha! Week number 1, she gets the car, and when I ask about getting my car back a couple days later, she gives me attitude like it is none of my business what is going on with her car. I remind her she only asked for 1 day, ask a few more times about what's going on, but no response. I have to repeatedly tell her to check and refill the oil. Week number 2, one of my kids tells me the motor is shot and Mama is gonna buy a new car. When I ask how, I know I shouldn't have, just kind of blurted it out on reflex. I am told EB is going to have some charity to get her money. EB rips me a new one for involving the kids in something that should be between us, ignoring the fact that she is refusing to talk to me about it. She says she is weighing her options and will let me know. Oh, and she tells me also she doesn't know what the big deal is, as I don't drive my Crown Vic anyway. And the kids ask me why I am bugging Mama, since I don't drive the car every day as well. Bonus, by the way, her car needs to be removed from the mechanic's place and she cannot be bothered. It is filled with crap. I am getting calls from him, since this is my mechanic too. I pick it up and drive her car to my place. Week number 3 informs me that when her daughter buys a new car, she will use her daughter's old car and will let me know when I can get my car back. I ask her to make a decision about getting rid of her car as it is parked on the street and had to be dug out from a snowstorm, took a chilly 30 minutes off work and the help of neighbors to get it moved before the plows came by. Bonus number 2, she tells me it was no big deal that I had to dig out her car because I would just have to dig out my car if she was not using it. I guess she does not understand that there's a difference between doing something for yourself and doing something for an ungrateful Karen. When my kids and I are at a Christmas party, my daughter is talking to her mama on the phone and EB has the kid tell me that my car will be back, so much for not involving the kids, and the key will be in the mailbox or on the porch. When I get home, her car is gone, my car is there, but no key in the mailbox, no key in the porch, no key in the car. Key cannot be found despite 30 minutes of looking in the sub-zero weather. I text the EB and she said that she was keeping my only car key until she gets her spare key back. The key I had because I picked up her car for her, pretty much. Oh, and she left bags of trash in the car and the gas gauge below E and just about out of oil. And the last one is titled Awesome Petty Revenge. Relevant background: for as long as I can remember, my father has stood firm in his belief that when my grandparents pass, he should get the majority share of their belongings. My grandparents have had a will in place for the last 24 years stating that their house and belongings are to be sold when they have both passed and the money is to be split between my father, aunt and cousin, raised by my grandparents from a newborn, and my nan passed suddenly in 2014, leaving only my pop. This past weekend, my father made the 10+ hour trip to my pop's house to start up this age-old argument once again. He made it very clear to my pop that he is going to contest the will, have my cousin removed and take most of my aunt's share. He stated to my pop that he is only looking for his fair share of the will. On to the revenge. My dear old pop then decided he wanted to make my dad's share as small as possible. He called me today saying he needs to have an important conversation, sending me into meltdown mode, believing this man was about to tell me that he was dying. But no, Pop wanted to inform me he is changing the will, everything except his car will be sold and the money will be split 7 ways. So instead of getting 1/3, my father will now get much less. The additions to my Pop's will be me and my 3 sisters. As for Pop's car, he is leaving it for me too. The best part is he is not telling my father a thing. I love this man with all my heart and I hope he is around for another 15 to 20 years yet, but Lord have mercy. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.